Welcome to Fox Valley Today. I'm your host, Ann Vickery. We are welcoming today from the University of Illinois, educator in horticulture is Richard Henschel. And good morning, Richard. How are you?
I'm fine. Glad to be here.
Well, you know, we're glad you have time. That's the good part. The bad part is you probably would have rather been in your yard working today.
Or in a vegetable garden or a community garden doing something. So
Yeah.
yes, we have time because of the weather.
Yeah, you know, we were just kind of discussing that before we came on the air, of the fact that neither one of us, and we both got a few years on us, could remember a spring like this.
That's true. Sometimes I can remember late springs, still snow on the ground, but not a spring like we have this year with the temperatures and the wind and the rain patterns that we're having. This is very different, very different.
Yeah, very odd. You know, what would you tell those guys that are gardener and you know, flower anxious? I mean, it's just a matter of patience, right?
This year, for sure. I did a short little video last Friday for our unit Facebook page, and I checked weather temperatures for last week, and our 5-year average had been around 50, 52 degrees. The last 5-day average was around 36.6 degrees.
Yeah.
So we're 20 plus degrees colder than we typically would have been over a historical 5-year time frame. And while those really avid gardeners get out and they're out there April 1st with potato seed pieces and they're very hardy crops, lettuces and spinaches and peas and things. It's just been so uncomfortable, so miserable, and the ground conditions really haven't been suitable to be digging in the garden because you destroy soil structure. I haven't seen anybody yet, even the early gardeners, out there yet. So everything still is going to be planted the same way we always do every year in the same way. But it's just going to be set back a couple weeks, 3 weeks.
A month. You know, it used to be that you could pretty much count on the fact that you would see, a lot of people had this thing, I'm digging my potatoes in Good Friday.
Yep.
You know, and Good Friday's come and gone, you know, almost, going on 3 weeks ago.
Sure.
And we just haven't seen anything yet.
Yep.
Now, we're not only talking about the air temperature, the soil temperature is a critical thing to both not only the vegetable gardener but the farmer.
Sure. There's plenty of groups out. The Natural History Survey in Champaign, the weather folks, they keep track of all this for us, and they take measurements on bare ground. They take measurements at the equivalent of what's under the sod for soil temperatures, and we have barely hit 40.
Now,
38, 39, 40s.
How often did they do that? Did they do that every day?
They take that's a daily measurement, and that's how they get the historical data that we can also pick up and use. So it is what it is this year. The soil temperatures are even on bare ground meaning it's a black dirt, equivalent of black dirt, which absorbs the sunlight, which absorbs the heat. You would expect black dirt readings to be warmer than, say, 4, 6, or 8 inches under sod of the same equivalent measurements. And there's not a whole lot of difference this year. Our soils are just not warming up.
Right.
So for us in horticulture, we think about maybe the crabgrass preventers and the other annual grasses that product also protects us from. Crabgrass still needs warm temperatures, so running out the old rule of putting it out when forsythia is in bloom doesn't work. Forsythia was in bloom last week, and yet our soil temperatures are high 30s, low 40s. Crabgrass isn't there to prevent yet.
Right.
I mean, and so the products that are put on too early, they'll run out of the steam will run out. They'll quit doing what they're supposed to do, and we're still going to get crabgrass. So it's just.
And crabgrass has got to be treated early.
Right, crabgrass you put down as you're protecting the lawn from the germinating seed of crabgrass.
Because once it's up, you can't do anything about it.
Pretty much. There are some post products, but they don't work very effective. And you have to, when I say post, you have to get them when the crabgrass is still reasonably tiny. If it gets up and obvious, it's too late.
Right. Okay, so soil temperatures, the air temperature, all have a kind of a real slowdown effect. And so when we talk about it in agriculture, we know that once we get past a certain point of planting dates, because as we talked about, seeds are built on growing dates.
Yeah,
they're-
growing degree weather.
Yeah,
Yep.
they have, a 90-day corn, 120-day corn, and based on that is yields, weight, and moisture of corn.
Yeah, ear fill, all that.
Yeah, all of those things come into play on growing dates. What about the gardener? I mean, is that the same? Or
Well,
our gardeners have a little bit more room to grow?
No, we have early tomatoes, mid-season tomatoes, late-season tomatoes. In the same way, the corn or beans have their short, medium, and long season growth rate. What's going to happen to gardens is the same thing that's going to happen to the farm. We're going to run out of those growing degree days before we get all the crop. One crop that we have a difficult time growing in northern Illinois, well, there's two of them really. One is sweet potatoes.
Really?
Because it's a very warm season crop, and if we don't get it, we need to get it in as soon as possible when it's appropriate for the plant to grow, and then we hope for a long, hot fall so that it can finish its completion. Watermelon is another one.
Really?
Yes.
yeah,
they're a long season, so that's why we are always buying our watermelons from some state down
Arkansas, Alabama, yeah,
right,
something
because
like that.
they have the season to grow them and get them big so that they can harvest them in full size. Our watermelons around here, for example, if we try, we might get a watermelon, but it's just going to be like muskmelon size unless we get it in early and can protect it and generate
But
the
isn't
warmth.
watermelon more dependent? Don't get but I know you need warm weather, but
Mm-hmm.
I've always heard that watermelon needs a lot of rain because it is basically
Well, it's
water.
when you think about cucumbers, it's virtually all water. When you think about watermelon, all water. All the vine crops require an awful lot of water. They need the water when the fruit is forming. They don't necessarily need the water when they're just starting out. You don't want to rot them and drown the plant, and you don't want to have so much water in the soil later on that you'll get the water moles like Phytophthora or Pythium happening, or the crown rots in there.
What makes watermelon sweet? I mean, how do you know? I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but that always bugs me. I go in and I pay $6 for a watermelon. I come home and it's just either tasteless or it's almost bitter.
A lot of that is based on breeding. Just like for sweet corn, they've bred the sweetness in. They've got double and triple levels of sugar these days in the genes that they use. So a lot of that is how it's grown, how quickly it can expand. It's the sugars and the energy that the plant produces that makes it have that flavor. Harvesting them too early, for watermelon, for example, you really do lose some quality flavor there.
So sometimes if you buy a watermelon later in the summer, it's going to be a little sweeter.
Yes.
And you know what? After I started that conversation, I got to thinking about that because I got to thinking that the watermelon I'd buy like around the 4th of July, because you always think, the picnic, would always be kind of like, kind of bland. But by the time you got to mid-August and you pick one up, they were like, oh man, this is a good watermelon.
So as I mentioned, we have early tomatoes and mid-season tomatoes, and the joke is, well, it was meant to be early, but not necessarily taste good. But when it's when it's your first vine-ripe tomato versus the stuff that we've been buying out of the grocery stores all winter, it does taste pretty good.
Right.
You take that early tomato against a mid-season tomato, and there's no comparison.
Right.
The mid-season tomato is usually much better flavor and texture.
And I always think the smaller tomatoes are much more tasty.
Yeah, all the cherry
even in the
tomatoes.
winter, those little cherry
Well,
tomatoes.
see, that's a mature little tomato. I mean, that's a mature tomato. It's just the size of a quarter or smaller. So you would expect the flavor to be there. And a lot of them are being hydroponically grown these days inside a greenhouse, so the conditions are just perfect.
Have you had any opportunity to visit some of these buildings now that are maybe 20 stories high and the vegetables are grown on trays and they're constantly being rotated
Yeah,
for sun,
it's
and have you been into any of them?
They're called silo growing or vertical gardening.
Uh-huh.
And it's just a way to take this, you know, the square footage of this stage right here, but multiply that up as many stories as you go, and you
Right.
can get many, many, many square feet, where if you just had it on the ground, this is all you'd have.
Right.
So
And I
it's
think
very
that's,
effective.
Yeah, and I think that's going to have to be, as our population grows and weather is more, you know, becomes more of an issue, that you can control the environment and yet still get a really good product out of it.
Yeah, the disease control is excellent, insect control is excellent.
Have you been able to visit any of those?
Yeah, I
Have
have.
you?
I've been in.
Where have you been?
Other parts of the country.
Uh-huh.
More often around here, we have more of the hydroponic growing, which is essentially soilless growing, and the plants are in a liquid media where the media just flows underneath, and the roots just grab out of the water as they need to the nutrients they need. The other method that works does use soil, or I should say a soilless mix. That's for disease control, really, and a lot of that we'll see on greenhouse tomatoes, for example.
Right.
So there's all versions of this, and they're all hitting particular marketable times in the year when say a regular tomato isn't available or regular cucumbers aren't available.
But they're hothouse. But
Yeah.
you've not seen
But,
any of the ones that are
right.
20 stories high yet?
To visit like something 20 stories, no.
Yeah.
I've been in certainly smaller
Right.
versions of that.
Okay.
And you mentioned been around. Hothouse tomato really isn't how we grow them any longer. It's not. Yes, it's a greenhouse and it's warm, but it's not the hothouse version of what we used to.
You used to
We
consider
used to
that.
have that. It's far more sophisticated.
Advanced,
Yes. When you have plants inside in a greenhouse and they still need to be pollinated, we would rely on outdoor pollinating insects, honeybees, other insects. In some of these greenhouse operations, they care for and culture bumblebees. And the bumblebees are used for the pollination, and they're docile, easy to manage.
I'm going to ask a stupid question. Does every plant need a bee to pollinate?
No, there are lots of plants that are
does corn
corn
cross-pollinate?
by the wind.
Right.
By wind. So there's either wind pollination or usually insect pollination. Many of our horticultural crops, essentially all our fruit trees that are not so fruitful, require some sort of pollination by an insect. Tomatoes don't require pollination, but they do. But they outside they count on the wind knocking them around to move that pollen around.
Right.
So in a greenhouse without wind, that's why they enlist, say, bumblebees.
The bumblebees. Yeah.
So the small grains don't need to be.
Don't need it.
Right.
The wheats, the oats, the barley, the beans, the
Right,
corn,
all that.
that's all cross-pollination.
Yes,
through
but
wind.
through wind.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. So, what's your thoughts this year on disease and pest?
Well,
for as late as the spring is.
Okay. The troublesome part about the spring that we're having being cold and damp, that's when a lot of the fungal diseases are thriving. They're just happy as clams. We, on the other hand, want to stay inside because it's cold and damp outside and ignore the situation.
And so does my knee.
Right, but all those things are floating through the air. So as soon as our apple trees and our flowering crab apples and other ornamental rosaceae plants like that begin to bloom, these spores are already out in the air, and if you don't protect, say, your crab apple or your apple tree from these spores, just as soon as a little green tip comes out of the bud, that tree can be infected. So it's going to be a very different year for orchardists. They're going to have to be much more diligent and monitor their spray programs to make sure where we don't spray by the calendar any longer. We spray when there's a need, but we clearly get into the habit of saying, well, I usually do this about April 15th.
Right.
Well, this year, that kind of time frame is kind of out the window. So they'll have to really monitor much
Now,
more
I
closely.
did spray my crabtree a couple of weeks ago. We had just a couple of days, it was 50, 55, and I could just barely start seeing the buds, and I think I'm gonna have to respray it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
The
because I don't
commercial
think it-
orchardists, they spray multiple times to
Right.
prevent some of these diseases.
Right.
Homeowners, something less. So if it's if the disease pressure is limited, mild that year, homeowners are more successful than in years where the disease pressure is high.
What is
This
kind
might
of-
be a high year, so
Yeah.
be
What is
aware.
kind of the normal lifespan of these crab trees that we have, these decorative crab trees that we have grow up around the house?
30, 40 years.
That's about it? Yeah,
Mm-hmm,
yeah. I think mine's on the other side of,
If it's not going up, it's going
yeah,
down.
yeah, it's kind of going like this, but more and more of it's dying out
Okay.
as time goes on. What about our lawns?
Well, there's another interesting situation with the weather. A lot of folks have put down crabgrass control products, and
Right.
crabgrass control products also control the other annual grassy plants that we would consider weeds as well. Those kinds of seeds germinate when the soil temperatures finally get up there into the mid-50s, and you have to have consistent soil temperature for 5 to 7 days before they'll even start to germinate. And as we talked about, our soil temperatures right now, they're barely in the 40s. So while our normal indicators say it's time to apply it, the soil temperatures are saying something else. So we need to wait. So I would say when we really begin to see the farmer planting corn in earnest, that means the soil temperatures on the farmland are adequately warm to germinate that corn seed quickly. We're about right for putting down crabgrass preventer.
So if my crabgrass preventer has already been put down, maybe it should be reapplied?
Crabgrass prevention materials pretty much have a limited time of protection. So if you put it down early
Right.
and the protection runs out and there's still weather for crabgrass to germinate, you're still going to get some crabgrass. You might have prevented the earlier stuff, but you're still going to get the late
Still
germinating.
gonna get some, yeah. I'm gonna get it anyway, but, okay, listen, we gotta take a little bit of a break, Richard.
Okay.
So we'll be right back with Richard Henschel from the University of Illinois, and we'll be talking a little bit more about your gardening and your yards. We'll be right back.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Maybe a hand with that?
Oh, thank you. Did you see anyone's broccoli? Thanks for helping us.
No problem.
Is You're welcome.
We'd do anything for kids. Yet 1 in 6 children in the U.S. struggle with hunger. Help end childhood hunger near you. Learn how at feedingamerica.org.
The litter box.
Your son wants to get a cat,
I'll really take care of it.
but you're allergic. Do you A, prepare yourself, B, make the best of it,
C squared equals
25.
Good job!
or C, find a loophole? When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers, but that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Makes sense.
welcome back to Fox Valley Today. I'm here with University of Illinois horticulture educator Richard Henschel. That is such a mouthful.
Isn't it?
So, but thanks again for coming over today. We've kind of covered soil temperatures and crabgrass and Mary, how does your garden grow? But you guys have a big plant sale coming up.
Yeah, the Kendall County Master Gardeners, that's their one big fundraiser for the year, and the funds get returned into the program to buy supplies and do demonstration gardening kinds of things. And it's going to be May 19th this year. The usual kind of time frame, 9 to 2. Right. And they have planned at least 3 little gardening talks for during the day. 9:30 is herbs in containers, and I think 10 is, I chuckled at that, the 10 o'clock one is what to do with all that zucchini. And then the third one at 10:30 is going to be about propagating cuttings. And then the sale's going on during that whole time, of course, and gardening questions are answered all day long as well. So, and they'll have vegetables they've grown from seed themselves, tomatoes and peppers. They may have some other things lurking about there too. We'll have veggies. There's going to be native plants offered as well as perennials.
You know, when we were talking about some of that, it just kind of slipped my mind there. But I wanted to back up and talk a little something about that you mentioned earlier about the plant, which brings me to some of this. Sweet potatoes. Why would a sweet potato take more time or warmer weather than a regular potato? Is it because it's so much more dense? I have to ask that question.
Okay, so our Irish potatoes and a sweet potato come from 2 different parts of the world.
Okay.
The sweet potato comes from far warmer climates.
Okay.
If I said Africa, I think I'm right. So that's a country where, you know, all that warm weather they had, so the growing days required for sweet potatoes is considerably longer than that of say an Irish potato. We put our potatoes in the spring, and you know, the tops die down mid-late summer. Sweet potatoes would still be growing and growing and growing and growing, yes.
But sweet potatoes are a root vegetable, so they're grown below ground too.
Correct. Just
right.
like
I guess
potatoes.
I just never thought about that.
It's really the origin of the plant.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I didn't want to digress, but
No,
anyway, you were talking about this, what to do with zucchini. Have you ever found a vegetable other than a tomato that could be used for so many different things? Did anybody ever think that we'd be eating zucchini pancakes, zucchini brownies, zucchini bread? I mean, have you ever thought of a vegetable that could be used in so many different ways?
I think that's,
and why?
I just think that was the mother of invention, because we ended up having so much. What do you do with it? So you get creative, and the cooks and the chefs and the moms and the dads over the years figured out, well, let's try this, let's try that, and we all know that, you know, nice, cute little zucchini, 6-8 inches long, is great for the fresh table, but when they become those giant baseball bats, they have a lot more meat in them, and there doesn't seem to be as much moisture. So to serve that up on the dinner table for fresh table use, it wouldn't be the best use. But because it doesn't have all the water in it at that point, it does work very well for the breads and the pies and the quiches and all the other things that we create.
And yet, this is my own personal thing, but when I eat zucchini bread, I feel the texture of the zucchini, but I can't tell you that by the time I put in cinnamon and nutmeg and sugar and flour and oil and all that other stuff, that I really do taste the zucchini. It just seems to add to the denseness.
Yes, it's just one of the...
Like a filler.
Yes, it's one of the ingredients, but it's one way to use up that zucchini, and that zucchini, young or old or more mature, still has the nutrition in it that we need to consume every day.
And I know I have a cake recipe that calls for carrots and coconuts and zucchini and pineapple, and the cake is so incredibly moist and so delicious, but I just always think to myself, is it the cake or is it the cream cheese frosting?
Well, you know, when you mention those ingredients, coconut's been known to absorb the flavors and retain the moisture of whatever it is you're cooking. Zucchini has similar property.
Properties
Yeah,
of
it's not
that.
so much that you're tasting, you expect to eat zucchini cake, you're not going to necessarily taste zucchini, but it
But absorbs the flavor of the
absorbs the
other,
flavor,
right.
retains the moisture, similar to what
Right.
coconut does.
Yeah, and I love coconut. So anyway, these are, and the plant sale that you guys are having on the 19th, which is going to be at the FSA Soil and Water Conservation Area there on
Yep,
Route
right,
47.
Right, there's two buildings,
Right.
they're mirror images of one another, and extensions on the right-hand side, Soil and Water's on the left-hand
And
side.
you can always tell when you go by, it sits back from the road, has that little tiny greenhouse
Yes, got
that
a
sits
greenhouse
right
out
there,
front, along
out
with our
front.
other demonstration gardens.
Plenty of parking.
Yes,
And
won't be a problem.
as I've always said, I'd like to tell everybody get there late, but so I can
So
get
see,
there
they're
first.
early, yes. A lot of plants do just disappear
I
very
mean,
quickly, so.
you have got to be there. It's, what is it, to stay at 9 o'clock?
9 to 2.
You know, there have been times I've been there at 8:30 and then, you know, things have really
They've already-
flown.
Yes, they
Yeah,
go out very
things go
quickly.
in a hurry. Now, these are all donated back from some of your master
Our master
gardeners.
gardeners, divisions from our own gardens.
And they,
And then, like I said, the peppers and the tomatoes and plants of that nature, we grow ourselves.
Uh-huh.
The master gardeners grow them.
and where do you grow them?
We start them out inside our building. We have a grow rack where we start them out. And when they get large enough, if they're getting, as you said, if they're getting too big given the weather and what's going on, they will get scattered out amongst the master gardeners to be in a bright, sunny location
Okay.
at homes.
Okay, now let me ask you a question. I want to make sure that I haven't missed anything. Is there anything that you'd like to add to today's program, to talk to people about, to let them know about?
Well, we started and then we both got sidetracked. I started on diseases and just make everybody aware of how much more conscious they need to be this year during the cool, wet springs to make sure they take care of business in terms of preventing diseases. Insects is another one that always is troublesome. Insects and plants kind of come along together. An insect isn't going to emerge until there's something for that insect to eat. So while the diseases are something a bit different this year, our insects, they're just as cold as the plants are outside, and they're not going to come out of their winter hibernation. The eggs won't hatch, things of that nature, until it's appropriate. So that's going to happen right along with the plants. So
Okay, one of the bugs, Japanese beetles, just shred my linden tree.
Sure.
When should we spray for them?
Well, this is, you want to spray the linden tree after it has bloomed.
Okay.
Bees, it's also called a bee tree
Okay.
by a common name because tens of thousands of bees will be on that tree harvesting from the flowers on a linden tree. So if you're going to treat your linden tree, absolutely after it's done blooming. So there may be some damage, but
Okay.
but
But it won't be shredded like it is. You know,
Right.
you go by some of these trees 1st of August and the trees are just brown. I mean, they've
Yes.
just been eaten
and
alive.
usually on the south or west side, more so than on the east and north side, is their feeding habit. These guys are buffet feeders, really.
Yeah.
Their sole diet isn't the linden tree and it isn't roses. They feed on a variety of plants
anything
throughout
that's out
throughout
there.
the landscape.
Right.
But the one commonality in all of that is they do come back and lay their eggs that creates the grub in the lawn.
Okay.
Or in a grassy area.
Okay.
That's their preferred. They may eat everywhere, but when they're ready to lay eggs, they always come into lawns.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Richard,
You're
for
welcome.
joining us today. Thank you for joining Fox Valley today. We'll see you next time.